Hello, welcome everybody to this new panel at Nextv Series Caribbean 2022. Around the world, all of the large operators are embarked on a critical reconversion process to upgrade their traditional pay TV offerings to really more sophisticated products based on full IP video distribution. We're just coming, we saw in the preceding panel how in the Caribbean, the largest regional players such as Liberty or Digital are really taking exactly this approach. However, this doesn't mean that smaller operators can also join this model. In fact, over the past couple of years, we have seen a clear trend emerge across Latin America and the Caribbean with a growing number of small cable operators and ISPs who are looking to add value to their broadband users with innovative video services that are aligned with this new way in which generations are consuming content.
Growing number of small cable operators and
yeah, so I hear some echo there. Probably someone needs to mute. There you go. Now, of course, the big question is, can this be done at a reasonable cost and in a sustainable fashion? So let me introduce the three very knowledgeable industry experts who will join me during this session to answer this and other fascinating questions about the latest developments, the new opportunities, and the future challenges facing telecom operators in the Caribbean. Stephen Curran is the CTO at Cable Bahamas. He's joining us out of Jamaica today. Rafael Pichardo is the Network Operations Manager, OTT Platform Management and Development at Wind Telecom, Dominican Republic operator, and Xavier Leclerc, Vice President of Business Development at Broadpeak, joining us from London, about to get on a plane to Prague. So welcome all, gentlemen. Stephen, let me start with you. Tell us, what is the state of this technology migration from legacy to fiber networks in general in the Caribbean and in particular at Cable Bahamas?
Well, in general in the Caribbean, there's a lot of customers who still are on DSL technology, twisted pair copper, which has been 100 years old. Some operators are using HFC, cable hybrid fiber coax, which is what we have in Bahamas. And then, of course, the newer operators like GSL have moved to fiber to the home. Of course, the holy grail is fiber to the home. Everyone wants to move towards that technology, but it's a cost problem. Of course, I should mention as well, there are wireless operators as well. I'm a wireless guy, so I always mention wireless.
Yeah.
But just for video distribution, I'm sure Rafael will agree, it's very, very difficult if every single one of your customers is streaming large amounts of video if you have a wireless network. It gets quite tricky with the bandwidth, which is why fiber to the home is the ultimate thing that everyone's aiming for. So we're in the middle of a process to expand our fiber to the home network in the Bahamas. What we managed to do was one of the good side effects of a terrible tragedy was the damage after Hurricane Dorian in one of the islands called Abaco. We had a rather large HFC plant there, but when we came to rebuild it, we rebuilt it with fiber to the home.
Made sense. Okay. Rafael, Wind Telecom in the Dominican Republic has historically used wireless as its access technology. I think the company name gives it away, right? Wind Telecom, it's connected with that. But the company has also started rolling out, I think, GPON fiber infrastructure, which is usually the key technology choice whenever fiber deployments are rolled out. What is the status of that sort of transition at Wind Telecom?
Yeah, as Steven said, it's basically the main goal of almost any ISP to get fiber as near as possible to the customer. You get all the bandwidth that you would need to do streaming, to do data, anything. So yes, we're basically starting the deployment of a couple of networks or a network, a GPON network, and for the moment it's basically connectivity. It's only for internet, but it's on the scope to add video to it and other features as well.
Okay, so we will touch on that later on in the discussion. Stephen, the next natural step, as Rafael was suggesting for operators that migrate to FTTH infrastructure, would be to also upgrade the video operations to all IP distribution. How do you envision this process taking place across the Caribbean?
Well, again, I can say for my company, we do have IPTV already. We offer that as a product to our fiber to the home customers. And of course, as you transfer then from HFC, linear QAM TV, then onto IPTV, that's going to be a natural progression as well. This RFOG step that some of the companies went at, I never really liked that as technology. I thought that was it was needed at the time, but these days, native IPTV applications on Android set-top boxes is probably the way to go for cable TV operators. That's the holy grail. I know IP inside the person's home. And also, as well as I keep insisting, hardwired to the Android TV boxes. I don't like this idea of using Wi-Fi distribution inside the homes, just because it might work in the States where you've got nice drywall, or but in the Caribbean with the very thick walls. I always caution everybody about using Wi-Fi for in-home TV distribution. If you can run a cable, please do that. It'll just save you. It's a bit more trouble at installation time, but it'll save you so many problems down the road by having a wired infrastructure for inside the home for your IPTV distribution.
That's a good point, isn't it? The thick walls in the Caribbean of infrastructure, just to be able to weather the storms literally, and make it quite tricky to do Wi-Fi. That's a very good point. Rafael, Wind Telecom already has experience in terms of migrating from a legacy digital pay TV to a pure play OTT pay TV offering. Tell us what motivated the company to transition to full streaming pay TV, and what is the current state of development of your new OTT platform?
Well, initially, what pushed us to that migration was more of a regulatory issue, but we had a lot of.
You were occupying MMDS frequency bands, and you needed to release those. Okay.
Yes, yeah. we had an MMDS, and for regulatory issues, we had to conceive those licenses and those frequencies
for mobile services.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and all of that because of 5G.
Yep.
Because of the deployment of 5G, and basically that pushed the decision, but the administration was already thinking and wrapping their heads on a project that I presented earlier on, and that basically was this OTT solution that, how can I say it? It's basically a solution that tries to emulate or to have all the key elements of a legacy solution, a video solution.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And what's the status of that development at the moment?
Excuse me?
What's the status of the OTT platform? Has already been launched? It's operational?
It's operational. We have around 3 years of operations with it, and on the current stage, we're trying to expand, adding some more content and adding some more aggregation so we can accommodate more customers to it. And basically, we're working with load balancing and failover of all our services.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Xavier, what do you observe in the market when telecom operators have the opportunity to deploy a TV solution in a greenfield operation? What's happening there? What are the key trends for greenfield operations?
Yeah, so I'm just listening here, the experience from Wind and Cable Bahamas. I think that tells us, moving into fiber creates new opportunities, right? Creates the opportunity to introduce new technology. And I think there are probably three angles to that, right? So with, fiber technology, FTTC or FTTH, this is rather an opportunity to simplify parts of the network, right? So similar to what Stephen was describing for Cable Bahamas, I can take an example of Megacable, one of our customers in Mexico. They basically had a cable footprint, so traditional DVB-C distribution, HFC network and DVB-C distribution on the network. And expanded their footprint with fiber, right? And that basically gives them the opportunity to introduce a full ABR proposition, right? You know, in their eyes, it didn't make any sense to bring the legacy stack onto fiber, right? So they didn't want to bring conditional access. They didn't want to have a hard drive inside the set-top box anymore. So they moved everything to a pure IP streaming proposition. So using CDN, using multicast ABR for distribution, using cloud DVR for the recording, right? So getting rid of the hard drive in the process. And, you know, for us, we very, very much see that as, you know, the right opportunity to basically change the proposition inside the home, right? We already started talking about Android TV. I think the main benefit of Android TV is having an open ecosystem. So basically an ecosystem in which you can easily bring additional applications. So whether it's Android TV or RDKV is somehow popular too these days. We think it's important to have basically a set-top box that will accommodate services from other OTT providers, right? So on the same set-top box, you have your operator TV, but you also have your Amazon Prime, your Disney Plus, and your Netflix all in one place. And that's, at the end of the day, what customers want today. They want this more rounded solution that gives them access to multiple sources, right? So I think, you know, this is interesting. You move from, you know, one access technology to the other, and you find obviously, you know, opportunities to introduce, you know, inflection points to introduce new technologies. And I think here, you know, I need to mention the cloud as well. We see more and more interest, you know, for the cloud, more and more functions of video being pushed to the clouds, like CDN selection, analytics, targeted advertising, that can be easily offloaded to public cloud environments, right? And the main drivers there are going to be time to market and reducing the risk, right? It's a lot easier to deploy it. It's less risky in terms of project timelines and upfront costs. So we see a lot of interest for cloud-based solutions today.
Yeah, that was, I was going to ask about that, because it's really literally everybody talking about cloud being the most convenient environment these days for practically every single new process and operation. So it makes sense to hear that. Would you say the latest OTT pay TV operations are migrating to a 100% cloud-based ecosystem? Is that what you're seeing ultimately?
That's a good question, Juan, right? I think my answer would be not necessarily, right? Like I said, there is an appetite to host some of the functions in the public cloud. So your AWS, your Azure, your Google Cloud. And we work with a number of telcos who want to outsource as many functions as possible, right? But what we see is that it doesn't always make sense, right? If you look at the public cloud, processing and storing data is cheap, right? It's very easy to you know, store and process data in the cloud. But when you look at video, what you need to do is move a lot of data out of the cloud, right? And this is where the public cloud is expensive because you pay per gigabyte delivered, right? So this actually prevents some OTT providers from delivering 4K services at scale. They basically tell us it's just too expensive. If I work with, you know, a public cloud, or if I work with a global CDN, it's just too expensive for me to deliver a 4K experience today, right? So this is where the ISPs have an advantage here, because it's their own network, you know, they operate their own network. Delivery of the video is always going to be cheaper from an on-prem CDN, an infrastructure that you build inside the network. So it's going to be more effective than relying on a third-party CDN, right? And the third-party CDN will anyway use the ISP network to deliver the video, right? So here, I think logically it makes a lot more sense to basically have your delivery functions whenever you're going to be delivering a lot of video, have it inside your network, have it as close as you can to the end users, because we know proximity means quality. The closer you are to the end user, the better quality you're going to have. But for some functions that don't touch the video, you know, like I said, the CDN selection, analytics, targeted advertising, for example, you can easily push that to the cloud. So for me, it's not necessarily one or the other. It's not necessarily 100% public cloud or on-prem capacity. I think they're actually complementary. And maybe one picture, I'm a picture person, right? One picture is, you know, how maybe the general public is using, you know, Uber or a taxi against their own cars, right? I think in some cases, it makes sense to have your own car. If you drive to work every day, you're probably going to take your car. But once in a while, you need to travel, you know, maybe to the airport or, you know, travel going out or something, and this is where an Uber is going to be more expensive. So it's going to be more convenient. So maybe a little bit more expensive, but more convenient at the same time, right? So I think this is the balance we're trying to find here in video as well. Some functions are going to be very cheap to run on the cloud. They can be very effective. Some other functions are going to be better hosted on-prem to give you the cost and also the quality the customers are expecting.
Good point. Very well explained. I'd like to translate this, the experiences that our two operators are having in terms of their interactions with the cloud. Stephen, how do you expect in general the cloud to transform your video operations at Cable Bahamas?
Exactly as Xavier said, that it's a hybrid approach. He's completely right. Just one of the points I'll mention as well is Cable Bahamas are quite lucky in that we have our own fiber infrastructure backhaul into the United States. So we basically have a big pipe that lands in Florida. A lot of operators in the Caribbean don't have that luxury. So they've got to pay for, 1 or 10 or, we have 20 gigabit per second off island capacity. And that can be very, very expensive. So again, if you have a centralized head end in Florida, it seems like a great idea in paper until you've got to try and find the backhaul to get all that HD and 4K all the way to your head end in, Jamaica or Dom Rep or wherever you're going to be. That's an excellent point. Again, the hybrid approach is exactly right. The value add, the analytics, maybe the advertising, maybe the pay-per-view movies, that kind of stuff you can put that on the cloud, and then maybe leave the linear or the 4K stuff, ingest that in the head end in the country, and then use that for distribution. So again, the hybrid approach is probably the way it's going to go. I agree.
Okay, and Rafael, I understand that you're using the cloud strategically to avoid having to rely on external CDNs for your video streaming product. How does this setup work, and how do you determine where to connect each new video client request in real time? How is that process? How are you managing that process at the moment?
Yeah, the idea basically is this whole system or systems has been built by us. So we have a lot of control, all the control of how everything works and what happens when. And basically we have a lot of pieces that were developed just to do that load balance and have clients connect to one server or another. Basically we have a CDN that's built in between our premises, our head end, and a couple of servers on the cloud. As Xavier said, it's the best idea is to have it as hybrid as possible and to have the content as closer to the client as possible. And that's basically what we're looking for, to have all services close and with the best warranty possible.
Okay, thanks for that. And I'll stay with both Stephen and Rafael. The large US MVPDs, the cable companies, large cable companies in the US are really all building the next generation video offerings around the concept of super aggregation.
Yeah.
But they're essentially bundling a growing number of third-party OTT apps within their own set-top boxes or even their streaming platforms. Should smaller operators, do you think, in the Caribbean adopt a similar strategy? And what challenges do they face if they are to do something like this? Stephen?
Yeah, it's a very good point. I think the problem is the scale. We, as a small operator, we find the likes of Netflix and Amazon Prime, they really don't want to talk to us. We're just too small. The holy grail is, of course, you go onto your Fire Stick and you set it up and you just click a button and then it all just neatly falls into place. You don't have to go between the different tiles to get your different applications. I'd love that. That would be amazing, even as a consumer. But it's just, we've left the realm of engineering and now we're going towards content management and content rights and all that lovely stuff. And that's really what the problem is. Engineering wise, it's very simple as an engineer to, well, not simple, it's got a bit of challenges to it, but it's not the big deal. The big deal is that these Netflixes, Amazon Prime, Hulu, they don't want to talk to you. You're just too small.
Yeah, it's basically a commercial issue, not a technical one. I agree 100% with Stephen.
Very good point. And you hear that over and over talking to not only small operators, I have to say. We've come across operators with around 1 million subscribers who tell me the same thing, and Netflix won't sit down and talk to me. Xavier, how can telecom operators overcome these barriers in such an increasingly fragmented OTT market? What role do they have left to play in this new game?
It's an interesting time, I think, now, right? Like you mentioned, there is more and more push to become the super aggregator, right? So providing one box with all the OTTs embedded. And yes, there can be challenges with the big players, wanting to, get engaged with a certain level of subscribers. I think it's a process, right? I think we're very much at the beginning of it. I think first seeing operators moving to pure streaming solutions is the right approach, right? Because that basically opens the door to more collaboration with the OTT players, right? So if you look at Sky, for example, in the UK here, Sky is a satellite operator. They have launched a Sky Glass proposition. So a connected TV, you can rent a TV from Sky and you get all your Sky content and the apps already embedded inside the TV. You don't use a satellite dish anymore. It's pure streaming. If you look at Liberty Global, similar proposition being launched across Europe and I think some parts of Latin America, with a set-top box that is pure IP again, right? So you get an IP set-top box similar to a Roku device, but very simple and with all the applications integrated. So I think this is where we're heading. But like you said, those are the big guys, right? The people who have a lot of subscribers. I think what we're seeing in the market is this idea of collaboration is gaining a lot of traction, right? And especially when we look at, combining OTT services that are live, not VOD, live OTT services with ISPs, because this is when, we create big problems, right? OTT with VOD, the Netflix, the traditional Amazon Prime for on demand, this is relatively easy to deliver because it's a volume game. You deliver a lot of the video on the network, but you don't necessarily create a high peak of traffic. What we've observed in Europe is when live content moves to OTT. So if you take, for example, the football in Italy, football used to be broadcasted by Sky, again, over a satellite or a terrestrial network. This has moved to a streaming proposition and is now offered by DAZN, right? DAZN is the Netflix of sports. They acquire a lot of the premium rights and they offer basically a streaming bundle from where you can get basically, for example, the Italian football. Okay, so that means in Italy, if you have, if you want to watch the Serie A, the top football, you will need a DAZN. You need today a DAZN subscription, and that creates a problem for the operators, right? Because instantly, you have a game on, you have, I don't know, the classic Milan against Turin, playing together. And maybe you have the South, I don't know, Napoli playing Rome, and that can drive very high audiences, right? You can get 10 million streams all starting at the same time. And again, here we're talking about streaming. So ABR distribution, traditionally working with a CDN, right? So we're talking very aggressive ramp up rate. Imagine 10 million streams ramping up in 15, 20, 30 minutes. This is very aggressive. And that creates a challenge for the ISP because this is the peak of the traffic basically may require more capacity than is available today in the networks, right? So this is where we run into problems of, capacity, not having enough bandwidth available, having poor experience, for the end user. And I think this is where the model is changing, right? I think today the OTTs recognize that they need to work with ISPs to deliver the right experience. So, what we're talking about scale and size, I think it's hopefully a temporary effect with, in time, more of the OTT players wanting to collaborate with more ISPs to deliver the right experience. And for me, what we've seen with DAZN in Italy, they've worked very closely with Telecom Italia, where we have deployed a multicast ABR proposition. Today, we see basically DAZN using the multicast distribution of Telecom Italia, right? So it's streaming delivered to, multiple devices, to set-top boxes, connected TVs, iPads, and it's basically being delivered using multicast inside the ISP network. This is, for me, a very good example of how the collaboration works better because the OTT gets a better experience at the end, and the network operator basically also saves money. They don't have to build a giant network, oversize the capacity for the specific needs of an OTT. So I think this is where we're going to be heading, the super aggregation, but with more collaboration. Let's do things together for the benefit of our joint customers. Because at the end, if a customer has a bad experience, they may blame the OTT or they may blame the ISP, right? So it's in everybody's interest to satisfy the customer, I think.
Good point. And I think you provided the example of sports in Europe with Sky and so on, but we're not very far off from a similar situation in Latin America, where some of the large sports, especially sports media groups, are also migrating their content exclusively to streaming, and you end up with a similar problems. So
similar problem, same bottlenecks.
Yeah. Good to hear there are solutions for those upcoming new problems. Rafael, in your case, you decided to go for an in-house OTT development, as you just said, which is not really, it has to be said, the most usual approach these days. What are the advantages and the challenges of having to put every piece of this engineering puzzle together by yourself, instead of going for a typical SaaS, a software as a service solution? Yeah,
basically the advantages are that we have control of all the processes, and all we need to add a feature is just to have it well documented and start developing. It's not easy, but it's not as hard as as it sounds. But that becomes the main challenge, because you have all these pieces on the table that have to work together and have a smooth outcome, because everything has to be as silk as possible, just to have a good product to the customer. And that basically it develops that game that you have all that flexibility on the platform, because we can do any feature that we think about and maybe deploy it on a record time, but it has to be deployed thinking of all the pieces that's going to be around. On a SaaS solution, you're basically close with a group of features, and all those features are going to work as promised, but you don't have the same flexibility.
Okay. Stephen and Rafael, you mentioned, Rafael, that you were having to release your spectrum for the upcoming 5G cellular services. When do you expect, I asked Stephen first, the first 5G cellular services to be launched in the Caribbean, and what impact will this new technology have on broadband and video distribution in the region, do you think?
Well, there are some 5G services already. I believe Trinidad has 5G, and the Dominican Republic, there has been some work on the 5G there. I believe there has as well. The English-speaking Caribbean islands, not so much yet. It's a bit of a chicken and an egg. You need enough devices in the marketplace, user terminals, cell phones, and CPEs with 5G enabled to make it worth your while, and then you have to have the 5G network to make it to get the benefit of the 5G devices. So it is a bit of a chicken and egg story at the moment. I hear a few different conflicts from around the world. I read that T-Mobile in the States, about 50% of their traffic is now, of their data traffic is now on 5G. And I was talking to some of my European friends, and they're saying 1%. So obviously the 5G is still very developmental in other parts of the world. It's not a case of build it and they will come, because it's just so expensive to roll out a 5G network. Never mind the fact that you need to get the spectrum from the government. That's problem number one. But even getting beyond that, to roll out a whole new 5G there is going to be a bit tricky. And then of course there are some problems as well around the fact if you've got a ZTE or a Huawei network in 4G and 3G, and now you want to move to 5G, what vendor are you going to pick? That's another little concern that we have in different markets. So the 5G picture is not completely clear just yet. I think the ecosystem needs to develop more. Also, there's also a business case. We have to see a return for our money before the operators invest, $20-30 million in a technology. It's great. I love 5G. It gives you more bandwidth. We get new spectrum. The latency is better. As an engineer, it obviously, listen, the same way that 2G led to 3G led to 4G, there will be 5G in the Caribbean. There's no doubt. It's just a matter of when.
Okay. And Rafael, what are your views on this?
Yeah, basically here in Dominican Republic, we have a couple of companies that are deploying 5G and have the services running. But as Stephen said, there's not enough data or equipments that are connected to that network right now. So we need to wait. And I think that 5G is the right way to go, and we're going to have a lot of bandwidth to play around, and let's see if we complete the promise with it. So
okay. I see there are some questions coming from the audience. I see a question here for Xavier. I'll move to that question before we end the debate, but I want to stay first on the 5G wireless theme since we're on it. And Xavier, do you think wireless operators can also aspire to offer reliable OTT pay TV services? Is that something that they can aspire to as well?
It's it is a topic of this year. I think we have a number of customers today that have deployed our product to serve fixed line customers, and they're asking us, okay, can I use the same product to deliver the video proposition to my brand new 5G network, right? Mm-hmm. So customers like I don't know, TELUS, for example, in Canada, we're having this conversation with them as we speak, right? So this is happening. I think there are two things around 5G. The first one is the networks are more open, right? So it becomes easier to go and deploy CDN capacity, for example, close to the end user to deliver this right quality of experience. So that's, the first thing. The second thing is linked to the business case, right? Like Stephen and my co-presenter here, sorry, what's your name, Raphael, we're saying, I think the business case is important, and we need to look for the right application. So one example, I think, that is really interesting when it comes to 5G, one things we've been hearing is that fixed wireless access is probably one of the main applications of 5G today, right? And fixed wireless access when it comes to video is, a good challenge. Why? Because people are basically connecting their broadband, the home broadband, to a cellular network, to a mobile network, right? Fixed wireless access is replacing fiber with just, 5G radio. So it becomes an interesting challenge. Why? Because the expectations are the expectations of a broadband, a fixed line customer. So connecting a TV to a broadband proposition. But the backhaul is going to be done over the mobile network, right? So if you're on your mobile, and your video maybe starts to be a little bit blocky, or it stops and start again, you're probably going to be okay with it. It's not a great experience, but that's kind of what you expect on mobile today. If your TV starts to have those problems that are related to the network, right? Sometimes you don't have enough spectrum, enough bandwidth, you run into more problems, then customers are going to be very disappointed, right? So for me, fixed wireless access is a very interesting challenge. And when I hear the likes of Verizon pushing heavily on fixed wireless access, I think Verizon in the US, they already offer fixed wireless access to a large quantity of households. I think they can connect up to 20 million households already today on fixed wireless access. I foresee some challenges there. I foresee basically people coming back to Verizon and saying, oh, my Netflix doesn't work very well, or my Amazon Prime doesn't work very well. So I think there are going to be interesting challenges for operators to solve when you start mixing 5G residential access and video. I think this is going to be an interesting proposition over the next couple of years. How do we deliver the right experience if the backhaul is on 5G and not on fiber?
Okay. Stephen, I see you nodding there. I know it's your field of expertise. I don't know whether there was something you wanted to add, or it's just an agreement with.
No, I completely agree that when you have a house with 4K televisions all doing 20 or 25 megabits per second. I see that's one of the questions in the chat. That's 100 megabits per second inside the home, and maybe the cell site, which is serving 200 people, is good for 1 gigabit per second. So you already use 1/10 of the cell site capacity. So my personal opinion is fiber to the home for people's houses, and then 5G when you're on the move. Fixed wireless for 5G, maybe for your holiday home, or maybe for a very remote area where you can't do fiber. But 5G for fixed wireless in the middle of a city like Kingston or Santo Domingo, I really can't see that working too well. Other than for in a city area, in a very, very heavily built up area where they expect 300-400 users per cell site with fixed wireless access. I see that being a problem, exactly as Javier mentions.
Here in
Rafael, yep.
Yeah, here in Dominican Republic in Wind, we serve 4G for homes, and I can tell you it's it's a headache. It is. You can make it work, and we have done a very decent job at it. But in cities like Santo Domingo, that you have tall buildings and all that, it's not a dreamboat for any engineer. So
Okay.
you can make it work, and you can have a very reliable service, but it's complicated, really.
We're back to Stephen's point at the beginning, right? It's easier to plug the cable inside the set-top box than using the wireless, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. And Stephen, you were talking about data rates. That gives me the opportunity to come back to that question from the audience. I think it's a question probably for you, Xavier. Patricio Maduro, director at Voice of Aruba Media Production and Communications, Aruba TV, the Aruba channel, is asking, is there a best data rate that you advise for a TV channel to provide to your head end in HD and 4K? Do we have an answer for that, Xavier?
Yeah, I mean, it will depend, right? Sorry, it's the very vague answer. It depends if you do live sports, if you do more traditional content. I think on average, I would probably say 10 megabits per second for HD, up to 20 megabits per second for 4K. We've worked with companies like BT in the UK, experimenting with 8K, going to 80 megabits per second. But it also depends on what you're going to do with the content, right? Is it realistic to squeeze 20 meg down the pipe? Do you have enough bandwidth available? So for me, especially working for a company specialized in delivery, you have to look at how you're going to be delivering the content. It's not necessarily the best it's also what you're looking for is the best out. What is the best possible quality you're going to achieve in the network, basically.
Okay, thanks for that. We are approaching our final 10 minutes of the discussion. There are a couple of things that I like to touch on with all of you, really, that open that to the entire panel. And one of them is advanced advertising or targeted advertising. We've been touching on the issue throughout some specific points of the discussion. Stephen, I'll ask with you, what future opportunities do you see for pay TV companies in the field of targeting advertising? Is there a new business opportunity there for pay TV operators?
Oh, of course, it's a huge opportunity. You can see the likes of how much money Google making. A lot of people don't realize it's the pay per click and the banner at the bottom of the ad that they make their money on it. They're one of the richest companies in the world. So of course, TV operators would love to get a bit of that action. We'd love to be able to say, okay, because the guy is watching sports, it's more than likely he's going to like to drink Lucozade, this kind of stuff. Obviously, it's a brilliant opportunity. Again, a business case again, and a bit of a leap of faith that, if you spend all this money on targeted advertising, will you be able to get your money back, or is the demand there? But I think it's a fantastic opportunity just to get the model right, though. Again, like everything else, not an engineering challenge. Again, more of a commercial challenge. As I said, with our matters,
Okay, Rafael.
Yeah, basically, target advertising is the best way to do this kind of solutions. Advertising looks forward to selling those advertised products, right? And if you do it targeted, it's gonna have more gains. That's basically the idea. So, as Stephen said, that's a commercial decision, and in operations like Wind's OTT service, it's a piece of cake to have something like that working on. So I think it's a good thing.
Xavier, what do you think? In some of the most developed markets, clearly the US is an example of that. This is already a reality, right? So what are your expectations for this?
Yeah. So I think there's, I was listening carefully to what Rafael and Stephen were saying. I think there's a big opportunity, right? We've seen it in the US. We've seen it with local advertising in the US, where cable companies have the opportunity to insert their own ads inside some of the linear channel. That's something that's been around for many, many years. What we're seeing now is the same thing done in Europe over ABR video, right? So over streaming video, we start to see basically live adverts that can be replaced by the operator. So you take, for example, at the top, I think 3 channels in France and the top 4 operators in France, they decided to work together on a standard so that the live ads can be replaced on the fly with more targeted ads, right? And this is a very positive model. This is a way of working where basically, like Raphael was saying, we create more value. It's more interesting for the advertiser that, you know, to know that you may be, I don't know, a BMW, you know, customer, right? So I will target you with the more premium German cars, for example, right? This is more interesting for the advertiser. They're going to pay more money. And that means that there is money both for the channel, right, who owns the content. You're advertising in the channel's content. You don't have the rights as an operator to replace their adverts with your own adverts. What you're providing is the ability to do that at scale and with the right quality. So the way it works is you're actually replacing those ads on behalf of the channel, and they give you a cut. It's a revenue share for the operator to deliver video. So we see a big opportunity. I think Orange was talking about 100 million impressions done last year, just in France. So that is a big number. But when we look at the overall scale, that's probably about 0.5%, maybe 1% of the total capabilities, right, of the platform. So I think we're going to start seeing a big ramp up when it comes to targeted advertising. And again, with a specific role for the operator, which is going to basically enable, you know, picking the best adverts, you know, with the technology deployed inside its own network. So, you know, manifest manipulation and the analytics are very important when it comes to advertising, but also enriching the request, right? So when I go and ask for an advert on the, you know, from a campaign manager, I can say, look, this is a customer living in this area, and I know that this area is probably a little bit more wealthy than the average, for example. So this is, again, very valuable for the advertiser. And I think going forward, you know, when you start thinking, you know, if the world moves everything to IP, if we see a lot more ABR video being delivered, this creates, again, more opportunity for operators to work with traditional broadcasters, right? Being able to scale video delivery for the broadcasters and being able to scale also the advertising for broadcasters. So yeah, a big topic for us and a lot of traction, at least in Europe here today.
Okay. Thanks for that. One final question. I'll ask each of you to be brief, less than 1 minute each, please. A general question. What do you think are the biggest, I'll ask you to provide just one big challenge that you see on the horizon for telecom operators in the Caribbean? It doesn't necessarily have to be video, broadband connected. Thinking of operators, the biggest challenge on the horizon in the Caribbean. Stephen?
A big debate about whether we keep offering linear TV or not. Do we just be a broadband provider and let the customers go and pick their Hulu, their Amazon, their Netflix themselves? Or do we stay in that business and continue to provide a linear service to our customers? We are Cable Bahamas, so I keep reminding my guys, we were a cable TV company that went into DOCSIS, went into data. Now we need to become a data company that does TV on the side. So we're facing a tipping point now in how we change our approach. And the question is going to be, in 5 or 10 years' time, are we still going to be in the cable TV business, or are we still going to be just a broadband provider with all the extra services that ancillary service that we provide with that? So that's where I see the future. That's the big kind of debate at the moment for me and in my mind.
Okay, almost an existential issue there. So interesting. And Raphael?
Yeah, and the challenge is it's very clear. It's content. All content providers wanna start playing in the game and not sharing with the small ones. So that's going to be our main challenge almost all the way until something happens. I don't know.
Okay, good point too. Xavier, I leave you the final 60 seconds to let us know what, in your view, is the biggest challenge for operators in the Caribbean.
Yeah, I think it's changing the model, right? So back to what Stephen was saying, and also Raphael here, it's not necessarily one or the other doing video or broadband. It's not necessarily looking at the content cost rising. I think it's about finding models where, you know, the networks can be used to deliver the right experience. So the combination, the collaboration I talked about earlier, changing the model where, you know, the OTT providers don't have to work with the global CDNs and instead can leverage basically what is already being deployed by the ISPs. So local CDN, multicast distribution for at the end providing a better experience and also potential revenues for the ISPs. I think that's the main challenge today.
Okay. Stephen, Raphael, Xavier, it's been a very, very interesting debate, high level. We appreciate your expertise on these issues. Thank you very much. Thank you to our audience. We invite you to stay tuning for our upcoming session. Promises to be also very interesting. We're going to be discussing streaming and free-to-air ecosystems. So please do stay tuned. Again, Stephen, Raphael, Xavier, thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Take care.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.